In the vast, empty expanse of the New Mexico desert, a secret was buried for years, a secret written in bone, scattered across a landscape that was supposed to become a new suburban neighborhood. In 2009, a chance discovery would unearth a nightmare, revealing one of America's most disturbing and sprawling crime scenes. It's a story about a phantom killer, a burial ground holding the victims of his silent rampage, and a city forced to confront a string of disappearances it had largely ignored. On February 2nd, 2009, a woman named Christine Ross was walking her dog, Ruka, on a dusty patch of the West Mesa, a barren stretch of land on the western edge of Albuquerque. The area was being graded for a new housing development, the earth churned up and flattened. Ruka, running ahead, got fixated on something sticking out of the soil. It was a large bone. Unsure of what she was looking at, Ross snapped a photo and sent it to her sister, who was a nurse. Her sister confirmed her fear. It looked like a human femur. Christine Ross immediately called the police, and what started with a single bone quickly spiraled into a full-scale excavation. As investigators carefully combed the nearly 100-acre site, the grim reality began to surface. One grave led to another and then another. This wasn't a single homicide, it was a mass grave. Over the coming weeks and months, authorities would unearth the skeletal remains of 11 women and 1 unborn child. The discovery sent a shockwave through Albuquerque. This was the work of a serial killer, one who had operated for years, using the desolate Mesa as his personal cemetery. The media dubbed him the West Mesa Bone Collector. This is the story of the massive but frustrating hunt for that phantom, the suspects who may have gotten away with it, and the victims whose voices were silenced twice, first by their killer and then by a society that had looked the other way. With a list of suspects but no convictions, one haunting question remains: who got away with murder, and why has justice been so elusive? To understand the scale of this tragedy, we have to go back to the years between 2003 and 2005, when these women vanished from the streets of Albuquerque. Their disappearances weren't headline news. For the most part, they didn't trigger massive search parties or widespread public outcry. The victims were overwhelmingly young, Hispanic women, and many were connected to the city's struggles with drug addiction and sex work. This common link made them vulnerable, not just to a predator, but to systemic indifference. When they went missing, their families' pleas for help were often dismissed. But these women were so much more than the circumstances they were in. They were daughters, mothers, sisters, and cousins. One of the first to be identified was 22-year-old Michelle Valdez. Her father, Dan, remembers a young woman whose smile could energize a room. When Michelle walked in, "It lit up," he said, emphasizing that she was a beautiful, loved person. At the time of her murder, Michelle was 4 months pregnant, and the tiny bones of her unborn child were found buried with her. Her mother, Karen, later recalled hearing rumors that Michelle and her friend, another victim named Cinnamon Elks, had been killed and buried on the Mesa long before their bodies were ever found. The 2 youngest victims were just 15 years old. Jamie Barella was last seen in April 2004 with her 27-year-old cousin, Evelyn Salazar, who was also found in the mass grave. The two had left a family gathering to go to a park and were never seen again. Unlike most of the other victims, Jamie had no known connection to sex work or drugs, a detail that only deepens the mystery of how she crossed paths with the killer. The other 15-year-old was Selania Edwards, the only African-American victim and the only one from out of state. Originally from Lawton, Oklahoma, Selania was an endangered runaway who was last seen in 2003. She may have been using the nicknames Mimi or Chocolate and was seen in Colorado before she disappeared, her journey ending in that shallow grave hundreds of miles from home. Her case highlights the terrifying reach of the predator or predators involved. Doreen Marquez was 24 and a mother of 2. Her sister Julie recalled the painful last time she saw her. Doreen was struggling with addiction. After Julie found drug paraphernalia, she asked her to leave, a decision that would haunt her. Julie filed multiple missing persons reports, but she felt they were never taken seriously by police until the discovery on the Mesa. Victoria Chavez, 26, was remembered by her mother as an outgoing and fun person who loved the outdoors. Her mother's grief was mixed with disbelief. The full list of victims is a heartbreaking roll call of stolen lives. Monica Candelaria, 22, Victoria Chavez, 26, Virginia Cloven, 24, Silania Edwards, 15, Cinnamon Elks, 32, Doreen Marquez, 24, Julie Nieto, 24, Veronica Romero, 28, Evelyn Salazar, 27, Michelle Valdez, 22, and her unborn child, and Jamie Barella, 15. As investigators pieced together their identities, a chilling pattern emerged. They had all disappeared roughly between 2003 and 2005, a window of terror that had gone largely unnoticed. The discovery confirmed what one detective, Ida Lopez, had suspected years earlier when she began compiling a list of missing women from similar backgrounds. The city had a serial killer, and his victims had finally been found. The burial site on the West Mesa was one of the largest and most complex crime scenes in Albuquerque's history. The Albuquerque Police Department, alongside the FBI, established a dedicated task force that at its peak involved over 40 people. But the investigation was a monumental undertaking filled with challenges from the very beginning. The first major hurdle was the condition of the remains. After years buried in the harsh desert, the bodies were completely skeletonized. This made figuring out the cause of death incredibly difficult. Investigators have said there was no obvious evidence of gunshots or blunt force trauma. The prevailing theory is that the women were strangled, but without soft tissue, finding definitive proof is nearly impossible. This lack of a clear cause of death would become a major roadblock for any future prosecution. Forensic teams worked painstakingly using dental records and DNA to identify the 11 victims, but finding the killer's DNA was another story. The exposed, sun-baked crime scene offered very little in terms of usable forensic evidence that could link a suspect to the site. Investigators were left with a mountain of circumstantial evidence and a puzzle with far too many missing pieces. One of the most significant clues came not from the ground, but from the sky. After the discovery, investigators analysed satellite imagery taken between 2003 and 2005. The images showed tyre tracks and patches of disturbed soil in the exact area where the remains were recovered. By 2006, however, the landscape began to change as development encroached. The site was graded and platted for new homes, burying the evidence even deeper. The window of opportunity to catch the killer in the act, or at least find fresh evidence, had long since closed. Detectives cast a wide net, looking into pimps, johns, and violent offenders. One of the few pieces of physical evidence found near the graves was a small plastic plant tag. This seemingly insignificant item was traced back to local nurseries. It was a tangible thread, something detectives hoped might lead somewhere. That thread, combined with other tips, pointed them toward people with landscaping backgrounds who would have a reason to be at nurseries and would be familiar with moving earth. One of those people was a man named Joseph Blee, but as the investigation grew, another name emerged. A man with a known history of extreme violence against sex workers who lived just a few miles from the burial ground and whose own violent death in 2006 coincided with the end of the disappearances. His name was Lorenzo Montoya. The task force now had two primary persons of interest, two very different men who both seemed to fit the profile of a monster. The question was, which one was the West Mesa bone collector, or could it have been both? With a crime this big, attention quickly focused on finding a viable suspect. Over the years, two names have consistently remained at the top of the list for investigators: Joseph Blee and Lorenzo Montoya. Both men had dark histories involving violence against women, and both had connections that put them squarely on the police radar. Let's look at Joseph Blair first. Blair was already a convicted serial rapist, known for a series of attacks in the 1980s. He was finally brought to justice for those crimes decades later through DNA evidence and is currently serving a long prison sentence. When the West Mesa bodies were discovered, Blair's own ex-wife called police and told them he should be a suspect. The circumstantial evidence against Blair seemed compelling. He had a landscaping business, and his ex-wives claimed he would often make trips to the West Mesa at night, supposedly to dump debris. This seemed to align with the plant nursery tag found near the burial site, as Blair was known to frequent local nurseries. A search of his home uncovered suspicious items, like women's jewellery that didn't belong to his wife or daughter. According to a cellmate, Blair allegedly referred to the West Mesa victims as trashy. Investigators also found his DNA on the clothing of a sex worker who was found dead on Central Avenue, though he has not been charged in her death. Despite these connections, investigators hit a wall. While they could trace the plant tag to certain nurseries, they couldn't definitively tie Blair to that specific purchase. And while his history was deeply disturbing, there was no direct forensic evidence, no DNA, no fingerprints to place him at the mass grave. Blair has always denied any involvement in the murders and has never been charged. The second primary suspect is Lorenzo Montoya. Montoya lived in a trailer park less than 3 miles from where the bodies were buried. Some reports even noted that dirt trails seemed to lead from his neighbourhood toward the burial site. Unlike Blair, Montoya's history was one of explosive, hands-on violence. He had been arrested multiple times for brutal attacks on sex workers. Co-workers told police he had openly talked about killing women and burying their bodies on the West Mesa. The timeline surrounding Montoya is maybe the most convincing argument for his involvement. The string of disappearances seemed to stop abruptly in 2006. So, what happened in 2006? Lorenzo Montoya died. In December of that year, Montoya hired a 19-year-old sex worker named Sharika Hill. Inside his trailer, he strangled her. As he was trying to put her body into the trunk of his car, he was confronted by her boyfriend, who shot and killed Montoya in self-defense. At the time, law enforcement said they didn't believe this was the first time Montoya had killed, because the crime was too brutal. For investigators, this was a watershed moment. The murders stopped when Montoya died. He lived near the site, had a history of violence that matched the presumed cause of death, and had even bragged about doing exactly what the killer did. One former police chief has called Montoya probably our best suspect. However, with Montoya dead, the investigation faced a new problem. A search of his home turned up nothing to definitively tie him to the other 11 victims. The case also ran into legal and policy roadblocks regarding the use of a deceased, uncharged suspect's DNA in national databases, complicating efforts to link him forensically to other crimes. So we're left with 2 strong but uncharged suspects. One, a convicted serial rapist, alive but behind bars. The other, a violent killer who is dead, connected by a chilling timeline and his own dark words. Is one of them the West Mesa bone collector, or is the truth something even more complex? Some theories even suggest a sex trafficking ring, pointing to the fact that at least 8 other women with similar backgrounds remain missing from that era. More than 15 years have passed since Christine Ross and her dog stumbled upon that first human bone. Today, the West Mesa looks different. The once desolate patch of dirt is now the site of a memorial, a place dedicated to the 11 women and the unborn child who were found there. It is a place of quiet reflection, but it's also a stark reminder of a case that remains a gaping wound for Albuquerque and the victims' families. The West Mesa killer has never been identified, and the investigation, which started as a massive task force, has dwindled over the years, though it remains officially open. Detectives still field tips, and the hope remains that a new piece of information or a new forensic technique could finally break the case open. A reward of up to $100,000 still stands for information leading to an arrest and conviction. But the case is a chilling study in how justice can be derailed. The initial indifference to the victims' disappearances gave the killer years to operate. The condition of the remains has made forensic analysis a monumental challenge. The stories of the two main suspects, Joseph Blair and Lorenzo Montoya, leave us with unsettling possibilities. Is the killer already imprisoned for other crimes, his secret safe behind prison walls, or did he die in 2006, taking the full truth of his rampage to the grave? And what about the other women who vanished during that same period? Are they buried in another undiscovered location? These are the questions that haunt investigators and the families left behind. The West Mesa case is more than just an unsolved mystery. It's a tragedy that exposed how marginalised women are made vulnerable and how societal indifference can allow a predator to flourish in the shadows. The voices of Monica Candelaria, Victoria Chavez, Virginia Cloven, Selenia Edwards, Cinnamon Elks, Doreen Marquez, Julie Nieto, Veronica Romero, Evelyn Salazar, Michelle Valdez, and Jamie Barella were silenced once by their killer. Their stories must continue to be told, not just to honour their memory, but to remind us that the hunt for their killer is not over. Justice, however delayed, is still owed. The West Mesa murders remain an active investigation. If you have any information, no matter how small it might seem, you are urged to contact the Albuquerque Police Department or Albuquerque Metro Crime Stoppers at 505-843-STOP. The lack of closure in this case continues to be a source of immense pain for the victims' families. What are your theories on this case? Do you believe one of the primary suspects is the killer, or could there be another explanation? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth look into a truly haunting case. If you found this story informative and want to help keep cases like this from being forgotten, please like this video and subscribe for more unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us continue to shine a light on cases that demand justice.